the challenge. We're talking about how to feel good and comfortable charging, coming up with your fees and then actually communicating those fees, right? So, one of the things that we hear a lot when it comes to trying to figure out what your hourly rate is going to be or what your tuition is going to be if it happens to be a school or program is that people don't want to overcharge. They don't want to be unfair or unreasonable in their charges. Yet, on the other end, they realize that there has to be a certain amount of fee in order to keep the practice or school open. So let me give you some examples. When it comes to hourly rate for sessions, you can see not uncommon, anywhere from $50 per session to $500 per session. So what causes the difference? Some might say, well, okay, if it's the higher end, it has to be that this person has a specific specialty, it's their education, it's how long they've been doing this in business, or it's one of those things. It is definitely the value, but it's the value that you see in what it is that you're doing. It is the benefit that you're getting for your patient or your client, right? So this is the reason for the fees. Once a person is established and they have established that these are the benefits that they get and they're getting these results, tend to feel more and more comfortable with the higher fees. So you may feel a little uneasy sometimes as you're going in increments if you decide to do it that way. And yet, here's the other thing that's uncomfortable. It may be uncomfortable to say, my new session per session fee is $300, $350, and so on. And you may in the back of your mind thinking nobody's going to pay that. You'd be surprised, right? It's all about communicating the benefit. Once you can communicate the benefit and you can prove that benefit, your fee is going to reflect that. And in reality, most of you are doing is actually priceless. So to be able to put a few $100s on a session is nothing with what the benefit is, right? So your challenge homework on this one is to make a list of the benefits that your program offers or that your school offers. I'm going to talk more about that in just a minute. Okay, the benefits. Coming back to the other end of what's uncomfortable. Say you decide, I'm going to charge one of those lower rates. I'm going to charge the $50 per session. Everybody can afford that. That's going to be exciting. It's going to get me market share and I can get more clients in. All right. So here's what becomes uncomfortable with the low end of the rate is I want you to imagine your calendar. And for a lot of you, this is already true. It's full. You have full days of seeing clients and you're maybe charging that lower rate. And I want you to now think about this. With all the busy and all the service that you're giving, does your bank account and your lifestyle reflect the skill and the results that you're getting for your community and your clients? Is that fair if it's not? So on the other end, what we see and what we hear from people is that struggle and that real feel of, I'm tired and yet I can't. I got to keep going. I've got to have a lot of clients because it's going to take so many to balance out your budget. So then some people say, well, I don't want my clients to have to pay for my life. That's not fair. Think about this. What is the client really paying for? What did I just say? What's that key word that your client or your patient is actually investing in? Isn't it the result? Isn't it the result and the benefit to themselves and to their families, to their community, to their job, to them being better, to them being well? Isn't it true that you really cannot put a dollar amount on those things? And isn't it true that their lives will exponentially be better as they become a client or a patient and they start applying the things that you learned? Well, how did you learn those things? Didn't you go to school? Didn't you invest in yourself to go to school and get that education? Don't you get continuing education? Didn't you probably specialize to learn even more? Didn't you spend hours and months and years, in many cases, perfecting what it is that you do? So absolutely, they are paying for all of that. Why? Because they're benefiting from all of that and they're happy to do it. So if we can, with a mindset shift, we can start feeling comfortable being more in the middle range or even the high range of those fees. I'm going to give you a story. These are two real life stories. The first one is a colleague of mine, and her job is to fill events. She's a marketing specialist, and she fills online events, meaning she helps if you want, to do an event and you want 500 people there, you hire her, she gets people in the seats. Prior to doing it online, she did this for in person, and she would charge a flat rate, $1,000. I'll fill your event, whatever, and sometimes she would go even under that, right? She had a returning client that she would work with over and over, and she started to look at her numbers. There is a key right there, looking at your numbers. When it comes to your practice, your business, what it takes to actually run that business, and what your bottom line actually is. So sometimes we don't look at that. We're so nervous about the fee that we're charging, and we're not thinking about what we had to pay for our continuing education, for our team, for our tools, for our resources. And then we look at that bank account and there's nothing there, or very little. She started looking at her numbers in two ways: financially and for herself and her life and her business, but also she started to look at the numbers for her clients. And she started to realize, especially this one returning client, this person was making $10,000, $20,000, $30,000 and above at these events and was paying her $1,000. So a person could say, well, that's fair. I mean, you charged me $1,000 and so I paid you that. And so what I end up making is not your concern. Well, what we want to be thinking about is the benefit that our client is getting. In our case, is when it comes to clinical holistic practitioners, we can't really put a dollar on ours because it really is priceless. But in the case of like the marketing world or businesses like that, a lot of times you can't put a number on it because you can exactly see that correlation between a person, the work that you've done for a person, and what's happening in their business. And so she decided to reevaluate. This doesn't make sense. I'm struggling. I'm still struggling. I do so much work to get those seats filled, and I have to invest in other ways to get those seats filled. I'm going up on my rates. So she jumped from 1 to 5,000, and the very next time she booked one of those contracts, she charged the $5,000. The person was like, absolutely, no problem. And again, why? Because the person was getting those results and getting them over and over and over again. So it was a no-brainer. Was she overcharging? Absolutely not. So this catapulted her into another level of business, and she's now a 7-figure earner. But even more than that, she's helped hundreds of people to become 6- and 7-figure earners, because that's her job and that's her specialty. What do you do? And how are you helping people? Also, by her going up on her rate, it allowed her to stay in business. Because guess what would have happened had she not gone up on those rates? She would have eventually had to close her doors. And then what happens to all those people? And I happen to be one of them. What happens to all those people who would not have gotten that help? We have to think about that. We have to think about those things. We need to be able to keep those doors open. So think about that when you're going to price and you're going to work on how you feel inside about those pricing. Very practical. Story number 2. And if you followed me for a while or been to my classes, you've heard this story. But true story. My program, my emotional support program, is called the Mood Makeover Method. And before it was called that, I had several different versions of that program, and we charged anywhere from like $25 a session. We did whole packages that was $175. I don't think we ever went above $300. And my mindset at the time, I knew it was valuable, but my mindset at the time was the lower I put it, because it was newer and I was practicing and I was getting those foundational members and those kinds of things. So I thought, oh, let me go way low so that they can, get these results and we can build up from there. But here's what I found, and that wasn't bad thinking. It's a good thing, to kind of get your results first, because remember we're talking about speaking to the results, and that is what people are going to be able to attach to when you can tell them what the results are. So it's nothing wrong with doing that at the beginning. But here was the interesting thing: with those low prices, people would pay. Either they wouldn't pay, it just wasn't interesting to them. It's like they couldn't connect to it. There was something about it that didn't even feel real or worth it. Then those who did pay, because I'll never forget, we had like these 10 or 20 session packages for under $300. It was completely insane. And you know that people were not showing up for their sessions. Wouldn't do it. There are two people in particular who I had talked about the program. One purchased and half did it. The other one was like, oh, it's not for me. And, I couldn't get any interest. Years later, when I had converted myself and really had, two things had happened. I had used the method myself and transformed. And I had used it on the clients who were taking it in and they were transforming. Even without trying, because at the time we were really focusing more on the chronic pain, but they were getting so much benefit from the emotional piece of it. So when I finished Mood Makeover, I decided I'm going to go for it. And who wants to join me will join me. But I was very clear on how much work I had put into it: my schooling, my practicing, my time, my resources. And I wanted people, I had come to understand that people, when they invest, they look at things differently. And I knew they'd give it more of their attention and their time. I knew it. So I rolled it out. And that same program that I was charging under $300 for a package of sessions, people are now paying anywhere from $3,000 to $6,000, have actually paid that for the same program. But here's the difference. Not only does it allow me to keep my doors open, but it validates and pays for all of the things that it takes to run a good program like that. And they don't miss their sessions. They don't miss their sessions. They're invested. And then when we started hearing that, and those two people, remember I talked about two in particular, one purchased but didn't show up for her sessions and the other one couldn't be bothered. Both of them paid the higher rate and got phenomenal results, right? So what I'm saying to you is, when you're thinking about what you're going to charge for your practice fees or what you're going to charge for your tuition in school, you've got to think more long term. You got to think about what's going to happen for that person and the true benefit exponentially that they're going to get. And you have to think about keeping your doors open. So very practical thinking, along with both sides are really practical, but the practical part of your own office finances and the benefit this person is getting. So I just want to leave you with those things. It's going to help you in feeling good about your fees and charging something that makes sense. It's going to keep your doors open, and it's going to make sure that people get the full result. Now, your homework for the challenge is making a full list of every benefit. Now, this is a real challenge. I want you to write down every single benefit. If somebody goes through your school and they graduate, what could happen to that person? If they follow what you have taught them in your school, what's going to happen to them? What's going to happen in their career, in their lives, in their families? Write down the real results that people could get if they follow through, and write down the results that people have already gotten from working with you. Make it as full as possible. Share that with me, DM, and then let's talk about your fees and see if we can't get them where you want them, and help you to speak about them in a way and your program and your school in a way that broadens who you're working with and how you're working with people. And it really can completely rephase, I want to say re-strategize, but completely change the face and of your business and how it feels and how it moves and what it does for the communities. So that is the end of part 2 of the challenge. Make sure you send that stuff over. If you want all 3 parts of the challenge, just either DM us or email. The information will be here along with the video, and you'll get all 3 parts along with it transcribed out and PDFs for the challenge.